Hey everybody. I have been reading our discussions and looking at some responses coming back from graded lessons. They are really just for me to get a sense or a feel of where everybody is on a topic. They are not really to regurgitate information, but more so, like I said, just for me to kind of get a sense of where everybody's at. So there's some things that I've noticed, and just to kind of answer questions that are coming up or reflections on things that I'm seeing. You will notice that I try to give lots of opportunities for feedback. Some things that stood out to me, that it is fast paced, and I'm very aware of that. Also be aware that I am working with what I'm given by the division, meaning if you are to get a credential, this is what they think we need to, at a minimum level, cover. So some of this I'm at the mercy of being told what we have to do, and I'm also I think pretty flexible in that I try not to be harsh with timing. Some things I am a stickler about, and I've talked about before, such as discussion boards. Just be aware of the timing of the post. If there is something that comes up and you can't do it, let me know. That's what we have Jmail for. My cell phone number is in the syllabus. And if you call or text me, if you text me, I should respond pretty quickly because I'm all over the place and it's easier. But if you call and don't get me, leave a message. I will call you back. But just keep me in the loop with what's going on. And I do try to give as much time as I can without giving you so much ahead of time. Just because as things occur or things that I see come up, I may make edits to assignments. So I'm not going to post the entire 8 weeks all at once because I want to keep us kind of together as a group. But with that being said, I do try to give as much advance notice as I can. And I completely understand because I work full-time in addition to teaching this and observing some students in their 184 and 284 courses. Other things that go on, I am also a wife and a mom of a 7-year-old. So yeah, and I'm in school too. I forgot about that. So I do understand that timing is not always easy. But part of that is something that we are agreeing to do. So do the best you can with what you have, and I would always prefer for you to take longer and turn in your what you feel is best or better work than to turn something in just to turn it in. I've noticed some concerns that you're being graded on how you write, and I wish I had a little more clarity on what that meant. But grammar, spelling, those things, they are on the rubrics, but it's because we have to be able to communicate. If you are an administrator of a program, you want to write a grant, you want to go speak to the partnership board, you want to apply for funding, it's important that we be able to write a sentence and be clear in what we are saying. And that is on the rubrics, but no, I'm not here to get crazy into APA formatting and all that kind of thing. Now, if you do cite something from, let's say, Holly Bruno, be sure to say that it's Bruno's words. And that's about as far as I'm going to look into that. Just don't try to turn something in as your own if it's not, because now we are looking at a whole nother can of worms, which is plagiarism. And we know from Stanley and myself that if you're in here to learn, what's the point in copying someone else's thoughts? And not only that, it's illegal, but it's also against Stanley policy. I'm also looking just to see clarity of your thought. If you make a generalized statement, such as, I like that this curriculum does X, Y, Z, don't stop there. Why do you like it? Do you think it's beneficial? I'm not looking for a novel, but just explain what it is that you're thinking. I've noticed some comments too that you like videos, so I'm trying to make sure that there are plenty of them. They do take time, and again, I understand where you are with time as well. So, but I think they're helpful. It gives me a chance to explain some things from my point of view, which I don't expect everyone to agree with, but I know for me personally, I like an in-person learning opportunity more so than online. And this is another way that we can get a little bit closer to that. I know last week was more about curriculum and pedagogy, but as we are starting to turn in some of the assignments and I'm looking back on folks' answers from the graded lesson, there's a few things that I wanted to share just so that you hear it. What curriculum is and what it is not. Now, there are different styles that you will probably notice as you're working on that assignment, unless as you've probably noticed it too for those of you that I see have turned it in. They're influenced from what we know. The behaviorist perspective is going to show some more direct instruction. So when you think of behaviorism, think of Skinner, Pavlov's dogs. We are trained based on reinforcements around us. And we also tend to think or see that related to a more direct instruction, teacher-driven activities. I, as the teacher in this particular curriculum model, may have more activities that are already given to me, and I am just the one who is doing that to the children. The constructivist approach is more Piaget-inspired. You'll see a little bit more Bronfenbrenner-y type things here, where we see how the social world is affecting things. It's more interactive, meaning we believe that children learn through hands-on experiences. That doesn't mean you're not going to see the behaviorist approach. I think that we tend to feel, hey, the children are playing, I'm bringing them to a table and we're going to play a game about letters. Well, that's still very teacher-directed. That is not free play. Does it mean that it's bad? No, not at all. It's just kind of being able to think about where things come from. Curriculum is not the specific skills that we're trying to teach or the beliefs that guide how you interact with children. If you believe that asking open-ended questions and pushing thought is your style, that is not curriculum. Curriculum is just, what are you teaching? I know that sounds kind of confusing to wrap your head around. The pieces on the left I pulled from NACCE and some other research because these things tend to ring true across the board. What is effective curricula? Well, we find it to be effective when children seem to be engaged. It's clearly set up as to what your goals are. Teachers are meaningfully interacting with children. Evidence-based, builds on and includes prior experiences in learning, meaning this could kind of relate to themes in a way. So rather than saying this week is the letter A and we are talking about fall and going with what you want to do for the children, it's more of an approach of having the children come together. They're talking about what's going on in their lives, and you discuss with them where to go. What things are you interested in? What do you know about it already? Who's been there before? What was it like? And going in that direction. Comprehensive, meaning that it's kind of including all of it. You are thinking about social emotional skills, language development, fine motor opportunities, providing ways for these opportunities to naturally occur, and being aligned with standards and appropriate assessments. So, for example, if it's aligned with standards, and you'll see everybody and their brother who is selling curriculum say, yes, we align with NC Feld, I'm going to tell you now, look at the standards or the goals side by side with what NC Feld says, because most of the time, if you're really careful, you're going to find some places, and sometimes it's blatantly obvious, that do not align with the standards we have in North Carolina. Again, does it mean it's bad? No, but it just means that you need to be aware of it. So what is it really? I think the easiest way to think about this is, I know this definition from NAEYC says that it's seen as the means by which a society helps learners acquire the knowledge, skills, and values that society deems most worth having. So if we think about just that little nugget, what are the knowledge, skills, and values that society deems most worth having? I think we see that all day long. And I'm not knocking anything, but with this whole push of ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, school readiness, behavior systems that rely on rewards, I think we really see our values in society in general showing up in early childhood classrooms, which can be scary if we're not aware of why we're doing what we are doing. Because to me, what I believe the knowledge, skills, and values that are important in society are really more about caring about others, empathy, everyone having a voice, equal access to opportunities and resources. That looks very different in an early childhood classroom. So these are things that I really want you to think about. And that's why I've said at the bottom, it's very important to know your mission and what you believe young children should know. Why are you pushing ABCs? If you think that that's important for a 3-year-old to begin recognizing letters, even though we know that that may not be developmentally appropriate, then I can see why that shows up in your classroom. The piece of this is I am not knocking what anyone is doing. I am saying it's important, if you are going to do it, to know why you do it. And you can see how this shows up in other countries and across the world. I think personally the Te Oriki, or the models of early childhood learning foundations, I shouldn't call it foundations because that's North Carolina, their model for what young children should know, these are their, I guess, domains: family and community, holistic development, relationships, and empowerment. Just those labels alone make me want to go and see in person what this is like. I have friends that have gone and worked in early childhood facilities in New Zealand, and it is so interesting to hear how they are really doing these things. If children need a bath and a shower at school, they get that. And I know here, throw regulations and sanitation out the window. The point of this is the practices that they have in place are really supporting what they believe in their society. Now, moving down, you can see that other countries have things too. These are just 2 examples. You could find a billion if you start researching this. Kenya has some as well, but they are such a diverse area that local regions themselves decide on what it is we think young children should know. And in North Carolina, we've got folks who came together to create the foundations for early learning and development. This is also what we think young children should be able to do at certain stages in their development. And as you look through there, you will see that there's a lot of overlap. There's no 0 to 6 months and 6 to 12. And just because a child may fall into certain areas in one place and certain areas in another does not mean that they are behind or ahead of the game. It's just where they are developmentally. So, being that this sounds so confusing and so many things to think about, why do we even worry about using it? Well, you need your staff and one center, if nothing else, to be on the same page. If you're working on specific things because of your values and beliefs in the 2-year-old classroom, and that child goes into the 3-year-old classroom and it's a completely different structure, set of goals and standards, you're setting yourself up for some other problems. Mandated. NC Pre-K. They use creative curriculum, and that is what it is. They also have billions of classrooms to monitor. So going with this one specific curriculum makes it easier and more efficient for them to be able to do that. NAEYC accreditation has its own set of standards if you want to be NAEYC accredited. But the biggest reason is to teach your values. So how do you know what to choose? Well, first you got to know what you value. What do you think kids should know? Do you decide that? Do you have the power to decide that for children? What about staff opinion? What do families think their kids should know? What do you know is developmentally appropriate? And I know that it often comes up that families have expectations that you may not agree with, such as, why is my 3-year-old not writing their name? The example I gave here is you wouldn't be trying to teach a 2-year-old to correctly hold a pencil because it's not appropriate at that point in time. So once you think about these things, what are your values? What do you think children should learn? Then you can better assess how well a particular curriculum model meets the needs that you know about. And it doesn't have to be rigid, and you don't have to say, hey, it's creative curriculum, although there's nothing wrong with doing that. It can be what works for you from multiple sources. I mentioned the standards, but we've also got to think about this push, and this goes back to society's values of kindergarten readiness. Nowhere in foundations will you see it say that in order to go to kindergarten, a child should know the alphabet, write their name, or read. I'm going to flat out say it. Dig through there. You're going to see pre-writing, pre-reading skills, interest in books, turning pages in the right direction. But I know that we have this misconception that these things have to happen before they go to kindergarten. Well, is that our place to do what we know is not developmentally right? Or is that the K-12's place to think more about what are our expectations of kindergartners? How can we be advocates and do what NAEYC has charged us to do to get involved and start having these conversations? So, again, I'm not saying if you want your preschoolers who are getting ready to leave for kindergarten to be writing their name is a wrong thing. It's not. If you have children that are at that point, then it's great. But if you have activities designed every day where a child is forced to copy their name, you might want to think about what your expectations are compared to what we know is best practice for children at certain stages in their development. When you're thinking about curriculum, you got to think about what you need. I noticed a couple of you in the graded lesson talked about this would be really hard to do for multiple reasons. Resources. You need money just to get all the stuff for some of these. What technology do you need? How do you assess what the children know? Do your staff even have the skills and readiness to adopt what it is you are trying to implement? Some of these relate to more teachers with more longevity in the field. I would not expect a teacher who has had nothing more than EDU 119 as their experience with young children to be able to walk into a center that is, let's say, Reggio Emilia to fidelity and be able to just pick it up and run with it. You will need to support that teacher in a different way. You also have to consider mandated curriculum. So if it's NC Pre-K, Head Start, you go into a corporately owned facility and this is what it is, that's a choice that you make. And I know some of you are not in a place that can change what's being used, but it's something for you to think about. Like I said, staff abilities, cultural differences. There are some curricula that will have themes that say this week we are talking about cities and towns, and these are the people we talk about. Police officers, firefighters, teachers, and doctors. You have a classroom full of children who are in a place where it may be rural and this has no relevance to their life at all as a 3-year-old. That's something that you might want to think about. Like I said, the needs of children and families. What do they think children should know? And again, time, resources. How much is this going to cost to even buy this model? So thinking about it, I just want to push you to say, think about what kind of community do you want to live in? And if it's more important to have one value over another, then think about ways that we can start shifting what it is we do, because we are responsible for what these children learn, whether it's empathy, self-control. The values that you carry are what's going to influence what these children walk out of the room with. Now, I know in the midst of this week you're looking at tools, and I called them that. Someone mentioned they keep thinking about tools that we use in real life. And my reason for calling them tools is because to me, when we say a scale or an assessment, I think about testing. And testing to me is a pass-fail. It's right or wrong. And that's not what this is, because a tool is something that I see that we use to change things, to build things, to make things better, to take things apart. And that's how I like to think of all the ones that I've kind of shown you bits and pieces of. There's a lot of different reasons you can use them, but basically, are we doing what we say we do is why we try to find specific tools to assess the practices that we have in place. You got to know what you want to measure, and you have to know what you believe in. And just because something says something in a tool, it doesn't mean that it's going to fit your program. And if you don't know what an indicator means or why it might be there, do some research. What's the point? Why might someone say this is important for young children? I always bring up much of the day because it turns into this big ordeal. But research shows that the longer children have to engage in free play, and I don't mean free play where you set up an activity that children come and do with you. Free play as in uninterrupted, not guided or set up by the teacher. The longer that they do that, it takes them over an hour for their brains to actually engage in what it is they're doing. That's why it's there. So it is not great practice to have a different activity change every 55 minutes to 45 minutes in a young children's classroom. So also think about the cultural fit. I mentioned this earlier with the curriculum piece, but it's the same thing with the tool. Does it fit where you are in the context of your program? And the biggest takeaway is tools are not meant to be a test. They are not meant for you to pick them up and change your center to score a perfect number. And they are not meant to be a one-size-fits-all. I know this probably feels jumping around a little, but some things that I've noticed too through our discussions and graded assignments. Talking about our button pushers, I find it really interesting that a lot of times this comes down to issues of control and power and our expectations not being met. So something it makes me think about is, how much control do you need? And I'm not negating that we do. I catch myself saying things to my 7-year-old daughter all the time that I stop myself and say, why do I need to control the order in which she is doing this? Does that really matter? No. Would I want someone to put that level of control and power over me? No. Now, granted, there's times that it's not a choice. If you have a child that's hurting someone else, that sort of thing. But control and power are something I want us to start thinking about. And in addition to expectations not being met. I think a lot of times we put expectations on our colleagues, on our staff, on children, and we never really defined out loud that we were expecting that behavior of them. So rather than hold it in or confront someone, these are conversations that we need to have. Along going right into the next one, that we don't all define respect the same way. And if you go back and look through that discussion board on the book club, and it shows up in other places too, is a lot of times we talk about respect, but then when we give an example of what we mean, it's very, very different. Until we talk as a staff and with the children in our classroom about what respect means, that is a really vague word. Now, there's some things in our society that we kind of all have an understanding of in our social context. Respect is that I think we would all agree you wouldn't just walk up to someone in public and push them. That's disrespectful. But there's other things that are a very fine line, especially if you think about cultural expectations. One that came up in a few different places was the idea of time and timeliness. In the United States, we are so time-driven. Schedules, waste time, in time, not enough time, wasted time, killing time. Time is a huge piece of American culture, but it's not for everyone, and it's not for every family. So if you have a coworker who was not raised in a family that considers time or your time a form of respect, we're getting out of whack over something we have never communicated. Something else that I noticed was comments about preparing for activities in a few different places. And I'm just giving you an example that I always think about when I'm going to observe is I see teachers who take time, again, to pre-cut out shapes or set up a bulletin board that has nothing to do with the children in the classroom. And it will often have these like pre-cut letters and borders and things that are just there for decoration. Like, this is just my feeling. So if that's something you value, then that's a wonderful thing to do. But I guess the way I see it is if we value the children's work, is there a way that they could create that board instead? I feel like we have a lot of things mentioned about the time it takes to do certain things that are really adult choice. So I just want to encourage you to think about what are some things that you do and that may be something you complain about the time it takes to do them. And then is it something that matches your values, or are there other ways that you could be using that time? Because I know that we already have entirely too much on our plates. I hope this is coming across the right way. I'm not saying it's a bad thing if it's something you believe in. I'm just saying, think about the things that you do and the things we complain about, and is it really something that supports what you believe in? Yeah, this is a little jumping around, but talking about respect again, if you have never done this, I highly encourage you all as a staff, get your staff together or the children in your classroom and talk about your community promises. How do you want to be treated? What are your button pushers? Have you ever had that conversation with other staff members? Because there's things that I will guarantee you will come up that you are not aware of. But when you know it, you being aware of it will help you be cognizant of it. And it will also help you not come up with assumptions about why someone does what they do. Which again relates to professionalism, and that is another whole topic that we could create an entire 3-hour course around. But with the idea of professionalism, it's hard to get high quality staff. It's hard to get staff who meet what you think the expectations should be of an early childhood teacher, and there are a lot of reasons. When we only have to have one class in order to be considered an early childhood teacher, there's one whole piece in itself. Do you think that one course is going to prepare students in a way to be a hire that you would want to hire? And if it's not, where can you step in to start giving feedback and be an advocate? But then where do you step in order to create that professional environment that even though it's not that way everywhere in town, this is how it is here? It's something to think about. There's a whole lot of pieces to this. But it's a word and a concept that I do want you to think about, especially as an administrator. Because you do have a responsibility to your center, your staff, but also as an advocate in the field itself. And last but not least, this is a little random. If you haven't realized it yet, every time I give graded lessons, there's a little thing that says email feedback, and that does go to your email because I do give some comments for everything that's graded. I say, what's the point? Because I know some of you are worried about a few different things, or why do we do this the way that we do it? But it's really just to encourage you to think for yourself. Ask why, instead of assuming something to be true. Just because someone has told us, or we are basing it on something we have seen, can we ask somebody to see what the truth may be? Or to get a little bit more insight into how to navigate this in a different way. Now, what works in one situation will not always work in another or in a different program, but ask why or why not. Think about the context of your program and how an idea or approach may or may not work out in different ways. I'm just here to provide resources, but it's completely up to you how you decide to use them. A few things that I've thought about since we're getting closer and closer to the end is a few resources that I think will be important for you as you continue on your journey. Most of the ones there in the middle are things that you already know about, but the top, Blueprint for Action by Paula Jordan Bloom, is one of the best books you will ever come across for early childhood directors related to the climate and how people feel at your center. If teachers are not served, happy, and treated with respect, which you should discuss, or supported, you will never have quality, because you've got to have the staff in order to provide it for the children. Doing the Right Thing for Children by Maurice Sykes is another book that I highly recommend. It's a very easy read, but it has a lot to do with the leadership qualities that it takes to be an effective early childhood administrator. As always, I've said it before, I'm here. Ask questions, contact me if you want to talk, concerns, and I'll try to keep my eye on the feedback buttons and involved in the discussion boards as much as I possibly can, and keep trying and keep asking why.